The farmer came to sign the divorce, but was shocked to see her 7 months pregnant. Rajveer was a man who had grown up knowing the rhythm of the land. Every morning, before the sun had even stretched its first golden rays across the fields, he would be awake, walking barefoot on the cool soil, feeling the earth beneath him. His hands, calloused and strong, were a testament to years of hard work. Farming was not just a job for him, it was a way of life, a connection to his family, his ancestors, and the village that had raised him. From a young age, Rajveer had learned responsibility. His father had often reminded him, the land gives, but it also demands. Treat it with respect and it will never fail you. Those words had stayed with him throughout his life. And when it came to family, he carried the same principle: loyalty, patience, and a belief that things would eventually work out, no matter how difficult the circumstances. When he first met Anjali, it was in the local market during the harvest season. She was helping her mother sell vegetables and flowers, moving gracefully through the crowd with a basket on her head. Her smile was quiet, but it had a warmth that drew people in. Rajveer noticed her immediately. She laughed softly at a joke her younger brother made, and the sound lingered in his mind long after he had left the market. There was something about her simplicity, her kindness, and the way she carried herself that made him think of her constantly. Their families arranged their marriage, as was common in their village, but Rajveer felt no resistance. The thought of a life with Anjali seemed natural, almost destined. When they met properly before the wedding, he realized that she was even more gentle and thoughtful than he had imagined. She listened when he spoke, never interrupting, her eyes reflecting a quiet intelligence. Rajveer was taken by her sincerity. He knew that she would be more than a companion, she would be a partner in the truest sense. The early days of their marriage were filled with joy, though modest. Their home was a simple one, just 2 small rooms with mud walls, a thatched roof, and a courtyard where chickens roamed freely. Rajveer would return from the fields, sweaty and tired, and Anjali would have a warm meal ready, the aroma of spices filling the air. They would sit together in the evenings, talking about the day's work, sharing small stories, and sometimes just enjoying the silence. There were moments of laughter, like when a goat got stuck in their fence or when the wind blew their laundry onto the ground. Life was simple, but it was theirs. However, as the years passed, small cracks began to appear. Rajveer noticed that Anjali often seemed distant, lost in her thoughts, and she began to complain quietly about the endless work she had to do, fetching water, cooking, cleaning, and tending to the fields alongside him. Rajveer, tired from his day's labor, would sometimes respond harshly, not out of anger, but because he felt frustrated. Arguments started to emerge over trivial things: a missed meal, an unwatered plant, or the way one of them had spoken. The village, as always, noticed. In small communities, whispers travel faster than the wind. Friends and neighbors began commenting on the tension between Rajveer and Anjali, some offering advice, others simply gossiping. Rajveer tried to ignore it, telling himself that they only needed time. But he couldn't deny that he felt a growing distance in their relationship. Anjali's smiles were less frequent, her laughter less genuine, and her eyes often carried a hint of sadness. He didn't understand how a life that had once felt so simple and beautiful could become so complicated. Money was another factor. Farming brought an uncertain income. Some months were good, with plentiful crops and a market willing to pay fair prices. Other months, droughts, pests, or sudden rains could destroy everything. Rajveer tried to remain optimistic, but the stress of providing for the household weighed heavily on him. He felt a quiet resentment at times, though he knew it was unfair. Anjali noticed his mood shifts, and it only made her more withdrawn. Their communication began to suffer. Where they once shared their thoughts and feelings, now they barely exchanged words beyond what was necessary. Rajveer would leave for the fields in the morning and return in the evening, and Anjali would be busy with chores or silently sitting in the courtyard. They were together physically, but emotionally, a wall was growing between them. Both of them remembered the love that had once been so strong, but neither knew how to rebuild it. Rajveer began spending more time outside the home. He would go to the village square, speaking with friends about farming techniques, market prices, and the weather. Sometimes he stayed late in the fields, convincing himself it was work, though part of him just wanted to avoid the silence at home. Anjali, meanwhile, focused on her own tasks, managing the household with quiet efficiency, but inside she felt lonely. The bond she had once cherished seemed to be slipping through her fingers, and she didn't know how to stop it. As months went by, the arguments became sharper. A small disagreement about spending, a harsh word exchanged in frustration, or a misunderstanding about family responsibilities could escalate into days of cold stares and quiet resentment. Both felt wronged, yet neither could bridge the gap. They began to imagine life apart, wondering if maybe distance would bring peace, though it hurt them to even think about it. One afternoon, after another tense argument over something trivial, a broken water pot, Rajveer sat alone outside, staring at the fields. He felt exhausted, not just physically but emotionally. He thought about his life, about the marriage that had once been his source of joy, and about the silent tension that now hung between them like a storm cloud. He wondered if love alone was enough, or if life had simply moved them in different directions. It was during this time that Rajveer started contemplating divorce. He had never imagined himself taking such a step. In his village, divorce was rare, and it carried shame and judgment. But he believed that staying together out of duty, when there was no happiness left, might be crueler than parting ways. The thought scared him, but a part of him also felt relief at the possibility of ending the constant arguments, the cold silences, and the unspoken frustrations. Meanwhile, Anjali felt the same conflict. She loved Rajveer, still did, but the constant tension had worn her down. She thought about her life, the child she might want one day, and the stability she craved. Yet, she didn't know how to express her feelings without anger or tears, and she often wondered if he even noticed the weight she carried silently every day. Despite the growing distance, there were moments that reminded them of their bond. A shared meal under the evening sky, the laughter of children in the village, the beauty of the fields at sunrise. These moments brought back memories of their early days. But the joy was always short-lived, quickly replaced by the reminders of their unresolved issues. As the story of Rajveer and Anjali unfolded, their lives seemed caught in a delicate balance, between love and frustration, hope and despair, past happiness and present tension. Each day felt like walking on a tightrope, one misstep away from falling into regret. And yet, neither could fully step away, for deep down, the love that had brought them together still lingered, hidden beneath layers of pain and misunderstanding. Little did Rajveer know, fate was preparing a surprise that would change everything. The decisions he thought he understood, the life he thought he had, were about to be tested in ways he could never have imagined. What seemed like the end of their story was, in truth, only the beginning of a journey that would challenge his heart, his understanding of love, and the very meaning of family. The seeds of change were planted, quietly, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the fields. Rajveer stood there, unaware that life was about to teach him a lesson far more profound than anything he had experienced in his years of working the land. He was about to face a moment that would shake him to his core, force him to reflect on his choices, and confront the realities he had long ignored. Rajveer's decision to finalize the divorce had seemed clear to him. He had convinced himself that it was the only way to escape the constant tension, the silent arguments, and the feeling that he and Anjali were drifting further apart every day. On a bright morning, with the sun shining and the smell of wet soil after a recent rain hanging in the air, he took the divorce papers in his hands. His fingers trembled slightly as he walked toward Anjali's home. As he approached, the village seemed unusually quiet. Perhaps it was his own nervousness, or perhaps the villagers, sensing that something important was about to happen, had chosen to give him privacy. When he reached the small courtyard of Anjali's home, he noticed that she was standing there, looking out toward the horizon. Her hair was tied neatly in a braid, and she wore the simple, faded sari that he remembered so well. She looked ordinary, calm, and yet something in her posture made him pause. When she finally turned toward him, Rajveer froze. His eyes went instinctively to her belly, and he felt a sudden, jarring shock that stopped him in his tracks. She was 7 months pregnant. The thought hit him like a lightning bolt. He had not known. Not once had she mentioned it. Not once had he suspected. For a moment the papers in his hand felt meaningless, almost absurd in the face of this revelation. Anjali noticed his reaction, the sudden pause, the confusion in his eyes. She spoke softly, without accusation, without anger. "Rajveer, I wanted to tell you I wasn't sure how. I didn't know how you would react." Her voice was calm but carried an underlying weight, a mixture of fear and hope. Rajveer struggled to speak. His mind raced with 1,000 thoughts, none of which seemed to form complete sentences. "But how, why?" he finally managed to say. His voice was a mixture of disbelief and guilt. "I didn't know, I never." Anjali stepped closer, her hands instinctively resting on her belly. "It happened months ago, Rajveer. I waited because I hoped things between us could improve. I wanted you to know, but I also wanted to see if you would understand, if you would care." The words sank in slowly, each one pressing on Rajveer's chest. He remembered the arguments, the frustration, the distance he had felt from her, and suddenly he felt a pang of regret so sharp it took his breath away. He realized that in his stubbornness, in his desire to walk away, he had completely missed this. He had been so focused on his own discomfort that he hadn't even considered her feelings, her sacrifices, or the life growing inside her. For several long moments, neither of them spoke. The only sounds were the faint rustling of leaves in the wind and the distant calls of children playing in the village. Rajveer's eyes, once filled with certainty about leaving, were now filled with confusion and a dawning awareness of responsibility. He felt small, almost ashamed, standing there with divorce papers in hand, realizing that this moment was not about ending a chapter but about confronting a truth he had ignored. Anjali continued softly, trying to bridge the silence. "I know things have been hard between us, Rajveer. I know you have been frustrated. I know I've made mistakes too. But this child is innocent. We cannot let our pride or anger affect their life." Rajveer's mind raced. He thought about his own childhood, the love of his parents, the guidance they had given him, and how he would have wanted someone to be there for him if life had been hard. He realized that now it was his chance, no, his duty, to be that person for his child. The thought of walking away filled him with an unexplainable sorrow, a sense of shame he had never felt before. The villagers began to gather at a distance, curious yet respectful. Word had spread quickly, some whispered, some simply watched. Rajveer noticed the anxious faces peeking from behind doors and windows, but he didn't care. For once, the outside world seemed irrelevant. All that mattered was Anjali and the child she carried. He finally managed to speak, his voice low and trembling. "Anjali, I didn't know. I didn't think he stopped, unsure how to continue. Words seemed inadequate for the storm of emotions inside him. "I was ready to sign the papers and leave. I was wrong. I was blind to what mattered most." Anjali looked at him with cautious hope. "It's not too late, Rajveer. We can still try. For the child, for us. We have a choice now. We can fight for what matters instead of giving up." Rajveer nodded slowly, feeling a weight lift slightly from his shoulders. though it was replaced by something heavier: responsibility, awareness, and a newfound respect for the life he had helped create, even unknowingly. He realized that the anger, the frustration, and the desire to leave had all been rooted in temporary emotions, in misunderstandings, and in fatigue. Now, faced with reality, he could see clearly what truly mattered. The conversation turned to practical matters. Anjali explained her current condition, the months of discomfort, the care she needed, and how she had managed alone until now. Rajveer listened intently, feeling a mix of admiration and guilt. She had faced so much quietly, without complaint, and he had been too wrapped up in his own problems to notice. As the day went on, they sat together in the courtyard, talking openly for the first time in months. Rajveer apologized, sincerely and repeatedly, for his lack of understanding, his impatience, and his harsh words. Anjali, though cautious, forgave him, recognizing that the past was a lesson for both of them. They shared memories of better times, laughing softly at the small incidents that had once brought joy, and tears formed when they spoke of the misunderstandings that had hurt them. The villagers, watching from a distance, began to sense a shift. Where they had expected conflict, there was now conversation. Where they had expected anger, there was now remorse. Slowly, they returned to their work, leaving the couple to navigate this new, delicate balance on their own. Rajveer realized that life had given him a second chance, a moment to reflect on his actions and to choose differently. He thought about the child, about the future, and about the possibility of rebuilding trust. The fear that had gripped him earlier was now mingled with determination, a determination to be a better man, a better husband, and a responsible father. For the first time in months, Rajveer felt a quiet sense of hope. The road ahead would not be easy. He knew there would be challenges, adjustments, and sacrifices. But the thought of facing them together as a family gave him a sense of purpose that he had been missing. He understood that true love was not just about the easy moments, but about standing by each other during trials and uncertainties. As the sun began to set, casting a warm orange glow over the fields and the small village homes, Rajveer and Anjali walked together to the edge of their courtyard. They held hands lightly, an act that spoke of tentative reconciliation, of hope, and of commitment. The child, still hidden beneath Anjali's clothes, seemed to them a symbol of new beginnings, a reason to forgive, to understand, and to rebuild. That evening they shared a simple meal, prepared together for the first time in months. It was quiet, without laughter or arguments, but in that silence there was understanding, a mutual acknowledgement of the mistakes they had made and the lessons they had learned. Rajveer realized that life often forced people into moments of truth, moments where decisions carried consequences far beyond immediate desires. This was one of those moments, and he vowed not to waste it. Later, as he stepped outside to inspect the fields before nightfall, Rajveer felt a strange calm. The weight of anger and frustration had lifted slightly, replaced by awareness and responsibility. He knew there would still be challenges, the physical strain of farming, the difficulties of village life, and the need to adjust to this new reality. But he also knew that the hardest part had been faced, acknowledging the truth and deciding to embrace it. As he looked back at Anjali, standing in the doorway with her hand on her belly, he felt a surge of emotion. Gratitude, respect, love all mixed together, forming a complex yet powerful bond. He understood that the child was not just a new life but a bridge that could bring them closer, if they were willing to cross it together. That night, Rajveer lay awake in his small room, thinking about the days ahead. He imagined the birth of the child, the first moments of holding the baby in his arms, and the life they would build as a family. He also reflected on his past mistakes, understanding that awareness without action was meaningless. He had to act, and he had to act with patience, love, and dedication. In the quiet village, under a blanket of stars, A man who had been ready to end a chapter of his life discovered the power of second chances. He realized that sometimes life's surprises, even shocking ones, could awaken the heart, bring clarity to the mind, and open the door to forgiveness and growth. For Rajveer and Anjali, the journey was only beginning. But for the first time in months, they faced it together, with hope in their hearts and the promise of a new life waiting just around the corner. After that morning in the courtyard, Rajveer left Anjali's house feeling a strange mix of emotions that he could hardly put into words. The weight of the divorce papers in his pocket seemed heavier than ever, though he knew he would not use them anymore. Shock, guilt, fear, and a flicker of hope all competed inside him, making it hard to think clearly. As he walked across the fields, the wet earth soft beneath his feet, he realized that he had never truly reflected on what he had lost, what he had almost given up, or the responsibilities that now lay before him. For the first time, Rajveer began to remember the small, tender moments of his life with Anjali, moments he had overlooked in his frustration. The way she had laughed when he tried to carry too many baskets at once, the nights they had spent under the stars talking about their dreams, and the quiet mornings when she had simply watched him leave for the fields, wishing him a good day with a soft smile. He felt a pang of regret. How could he have been so blind to these moments? Days passed, and Rajveer found himself restless. Work in the fields no longer distracted him. He would plow, plant, and harvest mechanically, but his mind was elsewhere, constantly returning to Anjali, to her words, and to the life they could still have together. He thought about the child growing inside her, innocent and vulnerable, and realized that his anger and frustration had almost deprived them of a father. That thought made him ache inside. One evening, Rajveer went to the village pond, a place he often visited to think and reflect. As he sat there, watching the water ripple in the gentle wind, he realized he had a choice. He could either continue down the path of regret and despair, or he could take responsibility and face the challenges ahead. The thought of leaving Anjali and the child behind was no longer an option. He felt a growing determination to do what was right, even if it meant confronting his own pride, his past mistakes, and the judgment of others in the village. He began talking to his friends, the ones he trusted most, about the situation. Initially, it was difficult to admit that he had been wrong, that he had almost abandoned Anjali while she carried their child. But as he spoke, he felt a weight lifting. His friends reminded him that everyone makes mistakes, and that courage is not in walking away, but in facing the consequences of one's actions. Their words, simple yet profound, encouraged him to think beyond his immediate emotions and consider the long-term impact of his choices. Rajveer also began to reflect on his own upbringing. He remembered how his parents had always emphasized the importance of family, responsibility, and honor. He remembered how his father had never turned his back on anyone in need, and how his mother had always worked silently, without complaint, to keep the family together. He realized that, in his haste and frustration, he had allowed temporary emotions to cloud his judgment and almost destroyed something far more valuable than pride or comfort. He decided to visit Anjali's house, but he didn't go immediately. He needed time to prepare, to understand his own feelings, and to find the courage to face her with sincerity. He thought about what he would say, how he would apologize, and how he could show that he was willing to be a partner again, not just in name, but in action. He knew it would not be easy, and that trust would take time to rebuild, but he was determined to try. Finally, after several days of reflection, Rajveer returned to Anjali's home. She was in the courtyard, tending to her small vegetable garden, her hands gentle as she worked. When she saw him, her eyes widened slightly, but she did not speak. There was a mix of curiosity, caution, and hope in her expression, as if she were waiting to see if he truly had changed. Rajveer took a deep breath and approached her. Anjali, he began, his voice low but steady, I have thought a lot these past days. I realize now how blind I have been. I was ready to give up on us, on our family, on the child. I was wrong. I see now what truly matters. Anjali listened quietly, her hand still resting on her belly. She waited, unsure of what he would say next, yet silently hoping that his words were sincere. I know that I hurt you, Rajveer continued, and I know I let my frustration take control. I was too focused on myself, on my anger, on my pride, but I want to change that. I want to be there for you, for our child, and for us. I am ready to take responsibility, to rebuild what we have lost, and to create a life together that is full of love, respect, and understanding. Tears welled up in Anjali's eyes, and for a moment neither spoke. She saw the sincerity in his eyes, the honesty in his words, and the regret that he could no longer hide. Slowly she nodded, a small but powerful gesture of acceptance. Rajveer, it will not be easy. We have both made mistakes. But if you are truly committed, if you are willing to be patient and understanding, then we can try again. For the child, for us, for the life we once dreamed of together. Rajveer felt a deep relief wash over him. He knew that forgiveness would take time, that trust would have to be rebuilt brick by brick, and that the path ahead would be filled with challenges. But for the first time, he felt a sense of purpose, a direction that was rooted not in anger or escape, but in responsibility, love, and hope. Over the next few days, he devoted himself to helping Anjali. He assisted her with household chores, helped prepare meals, and even spent time learning how to care for her as her pregnancy advanced. Each small action, each gesture of support, was a step toward healing the rift that had grown between them. Anjali, in turn, began to open up, sharing her thoughts, fears, and hopes with him. They spoke honestly, sometimes laughing, sometimes crying, but always moving toward a deeper understanding of each other. Rajveer also made changes in his approach to farming and village life. He sought advice from elders, listened more to Anjali's perspective, and worked to balance his responsibilities with the needs of his family. Slowly, the villagers began to notice the change in him. Where they had once whispered about tension and separation, they now saw a man willing to face his mistakes and rebuild his family with dedication and care. As the weeks passed, Rajveer and Anjali found a rhythm together. They would sit in the courtyard in the evenings, discussing plans for the future, sharing stories, and enjoying the simple pleasures of life. Rajveer would sometimes bring flowers from the fields for Anjali, and she would laugh softly, touched by the thoughtfulness that had been missing for so long. Rajveer also began to prepare mentally and emotionally for the arrival of their child. He imagined holding the baby, teaching them about the land, the seasons, and the importance of family. The thought filled him with joy, a new kind of motivation that made him more patient, more attentive, and more compassionate. He realized that the child was not just a new life, but a symbol of hope, a chance to start anew, and a reminder of what truly mattered in life. One afternoon, Rajveer and Anjali sat together under the shade of a large banyan tree, the cool breeze rustling the leaves. Rajveer took her hand gently. Anjali, he said, I know we cannot erase the past, but we can build a future. I promise to be there for you every step of the way. We will face the challenges together as a family. Anjali smiled softly, a mixture of relief and hope in her eyes. I believe you, Rajveer, and I believe in us. We have a long road ahead, but I am willing to walk it with you. For the child, for ourselves, for the life we can create together. The days turned into weeks, and Rajveer's commitment never wavered. He attended medical checkups with Anjali, helped prepare the home for the baby, and even learned how to cook simple meals to ease her burden. Each act, no matter how small, strengthened the bond between them. The love that had once seemed lost was slowly returning, tempered by understanding, respect, and shared responsibility. Rajveer also reflected on his own growth during this period. He realized that life's challenges were not meant to break people, but to teach them. He had learned patience, humility, and the importance of listening and understanding. He had discovered that true love is not only about passion and happiness, but also about sacrifice, forgiveness, and the willingness to face difficulties together. The villagers, seeing the transformation in Rajveer, began to support him and Anjali. Neighbors offered advice, helped with chores, and shared their own experiences of family and parenting. The sense of community, once taken for granted, became a source of strength and encouragement. Rajveer understood that while love and commitment were essential, the support of the community could also play a vital role in building a stable, happy family. As the months passed, the anticipation of the child's arrival grew. Rajveer and Anjali often sat together, imagining the future, planning for the baby's needs, and dreaming of the life they would share as a family. Each day brought new lessons, new challenges, and new opportunities to grow closer. Rajveer felt a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing that he had chosen the right path, that he had embraced responsibility, and that he was no longer a man running from his life, but one who was fully engaged in it. The weeks passed slowly, each day bringing Rajveer and Anjali closer together. The bond they had once lost was now being rebuilt with patience, understanding, and quiet acts of love. Rajveer had grown into his new role fully, not just as a husband, but as a partner in every sense. He woke early each morning, helping Anjali with the chores, making sure she rested enough, and tending the fields with renewed focus. Every small gesture felt important, for now he knew that life was not only about work, but about the family they were building together. Anjali's pregnancy had entered its final months. She was both exhausted and radiant, carrying their child with a gentle pride and careful attention to her health. Rajveer would sit by her side as she rested, holding her hand, brushing her hair from her face, and speaking softly to the child growing inside her. Sometimes he would press his hand lightly to her belly, imagining the tiny movements and wondering what kind of person the baby would be. Every flutter, every kick, filled him with a sense of awe and responsibility that he had never felt before. In the evenings, they would sit together under the open sky, watching the sun set over the fields. Rajveer would recount stories from his childhood, his parents, and his early days in the village. Anjali would listen, sometimes laughing at the funny incidents he remembered, sometimes nodding thoughtfully at the lessons he shared. These moments became the foundation of a new relationship, one built on honesty, trust, and mutual respect. The villagers, too, had noticed the change. They smiled as they watched Rajveer helping Anjali, offering assistance when needed, and actively participating in the preparations for the baby. Elders in the village would nod approvingly, saying quietly that he had learned the true meaning of responsibility. Some women would offer tips for pregnancy care, and Rajveer would listen attentively, eager to do everything correctly. It was a small but powerful sign that he was committed, and the support of the community only strengthened his resolve. As the due date approached, Rajveer's anxiety increased. He spent nights pacing the courtyard, imagining every possible scenario and praying for the safe arrival of their child. He worried about Anjali's health, about the complications that could arise, and about the challenges they might face as new parents. Yet beneath the worry was also a deep sense of determination. He was ready to face whatever came, knowing that this child would be a part of him, a part of Anjali, and a part of the life they had chosen to rebuild together. One evening, as Rajveer was helping Anjali prepare the bedding for the baby, she looked at him with a soft smile. "Rajveer," she said, her voice calm but filled with emotion, "I know this has been a journey for both of us. I want you to know that I see your efforts and I am grateful. We have both made mistakes, but we have also learned, and that is what matters." Rajveer held her hand tightly, feeling tears prick his eyes. Anjali, I promise you I will always be there for you and for our child. I will never take this family for granted again. You have shown me patience and love, and I will do everything I can to honor that. The days turned into nights, and finally, the long-anticipated moment arrived. It was a warm, quiet night, with a gentle breeze rustling the trees outside. Anjali experienced her first contractions, and Rajveer, though nervous, moved quickly and calmly. He helped her to the bed, prepared the necessary items, and kept speaking to her softly, encouraging her and holding her hand through each wave of pain. His previous fears were replaced with focus and determination. He knew that this was a moment of transformation, not just for the baby but for their entire family. As the night wore on, the village seemed to hold its breath. Neighbors whispered prayers quietly, elders offered guidance over the phone, and Rajveer remained steadfast by Anjali's side. He marveled at her strength, at the courage she displayed in bringing new life into the world. The earlier misunderstandings and tension between them now seemed trivial compared to the miracle they were experiencing together. Finally, in the early hours of the morning, a cry pierced the quiet night. The baby had arrived. Rajveer's heart swelled with emotion as he held the tiny, wriggling child in his hands. The infant's skin was soft, eyes closed, fingers curling around his own. Rajveer looked at Anjali, exhausted but glowing with pride, and realized that the journey they had taken through misunderstanding, distance, and fear had led to this perfect moment. Tears streamed down Rajveer's face as he whispered, "Welcome to the world, little one. I promise I will always protect you, guide you, and love you." Anjali smiled softly, her hand resting on Rajveer's shoulder, and in that shared glance they both understood that their past struggles had strengthened their bond. They had faced the hardest parts of life and emerged more united than ever. Over the next few days, Rajveer devoted himself entirely to caring for both Anjali and the baby. He learned how to change diapers, soothe the infant when crying, and even prepare simple meals that were nutritious for the mother. Every task, no matter how small, became an act of love and devotion. Anjali, seeing his dedication, felt a renewed sense of trust and partnership. She knew that they were not just surviving but thriving together, as a family united by experience, forgiveness, and hope. The villagers celebrated quietly, offering small gifts for the baby, helping with meals, and sharing words of wisdom. Rajveer welcomed their guidance, understanding that raising a child was not only a personal responsibility, but also a communal one. He shared stories of his own childhood with the village elders and learned lessons in parenting, family life, and patience that would serve him well in the years to come. In the weeks following the birth, life settled into a new rhythm. Rajveer and Anjali worked together seamlessly, balancing chores, farming, and the needs of their newborn. The laughter that had once seemed lost returned to their home, soft and genuine. They would sit in the courtyard in the evenings, watching the stars, feeding the baby, and speaking about dreams for the future. Each day brought new challenges, but also new joys, and they faced them together with strength and unity. Rajveer often reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. He thought about the arguments, the misunderstandings, and the moments of doubt that had once threatened to tear them apart. And yet he also recognized the lessons those moments had taught him, the importance of patience, communication, empathy, and the willingness to take responsibility. Without those struggles, he realized, he might never have truly understood the value of family and love. Anjali, too, reflected on the journey. She saw in Rajveer a man who had grown, who had confronted his own flaws, and who had chosen to embrace life's responsibilities with courage. She felt proud of the family they were creating together and hopeful for the future. The child, innocent and unknowing, had become a bridge that connected them more deeply than ever before. As the months passed, the couple began to dream again, not of the past but of the future. They imagined their child growing up surrounded by love, learning the ways of the land, the importance of honesty, respect, and compassion. They envisioned a home filled with laughter, shared meals, and the warmth of a family united by understanding and devotion. Each plan, each dream strengthened their bond and gave them purpose. One evening, as the sun set over the fields and the baby slept peacefully in Anjali's arms, Rajveer whispered softly, "We made it, Anjali. We faced the hardest part and we are still here together. This is only the beginning, but it feels like everything we needed has finally come into place." Anjali smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "Yes, Rajveer, we faced storms, but we found our way. We learned that love is not just about happiness. It is about patience, forgiveness, and standing by each other, no matter what. And now, with our child, we have a chance to start fresh, to create a life filled with hope and joy." In that quiet moment, surrounded by the fields, the village, and the small home they had built together, Rajveer and Anjali realized that life had given them a rare gift. The journey had been difficult, filled with trials and challenges, but it had also been transformative. They had learned that true love is not without obstacles, but that overcoming them together brings strength, unity, and profound happiness. The child's soft breathing, the gentle rustle of the wind, and the fading glow of the sun created a sense of peace that wrapped around them like a warm blanket. Rajveer felt a deep gratitude for Anjali, for the child, for the lessons of life, and for the chance to correct his mistakes. He understood that happiness was not something that simply happened. It was something nurtured, cared for, and protected. And now, with his family by his side, he was ready to embrace it fully. As night fell and the village settled into quiet, Rajveer held Anjali and their baby close, whispering promises of love, protection, and devotion. The hardships of the past no longer felt heavy. They were lessons that had guided him to this moment. He knew that the future would still bring challenges, but he was confident that together they could face anything. For Rajveer, Anjali, and their child, life was no longer about frustration, misunderstandings, or regret. It was about hope, love, and the joy of building a family that could weather any storm. The journey had been long, the lessons hard, but the reward, a family united by experience, forgiveness, and unwavering love, was worth every step.